Dig on America.
The media said what? Ha 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 ha.
Dig on America.
You are fake news.
Last call. Last call. Last call. Last call.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Last Call. I am your host, Lourin Hubbard, and joining me this week is a friend from what will soon be a rival state, because my Fresno State Bulldogs are going to play Boise literally next week, even though we're not really good right now. I mean, we just lost to UConn, which is like, But joining me from Idaho is Natalie MacLachlan, like Sarah MacLachlan.
That's right.
Right? In the eyes of an angel. Do you sing to people for fundraising? I hope you do.
Everyone just starts crying immediately, thinks of, endangered animals and
Which is kind of like how I feel like a Democrat in Idaho would be. Are you kind of
right.
like, what's the political scene in Idaho right now?
Well, in Idaho in general, it's pretty rough right now. We've got some pretty serious extremism that is starting to spur its head, especially for our primary elections. We saw sort of a big divide among conservatives from, the extreme right to your sort of old school GOP. And so some of the things that happened leading up to that and over the last couple of sessions have been insane. Right now it feels like people are on kind of good behavior with the election fast approaching. But yeah, it's a little rough up here.
It's a little crazy. And you're ready for the legislative district 22?
Yes.
For Idaho?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yep. We will definitely get into that and be talking to you about all things Idaho. Or maybe it's Idaho. But first, I want to give a shout out to all the folks that are joining us on Twitch and YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. If you like what you're listening to, like what you see, hit the like button. It helps us generate buzz on the interwebs and all that. I'm very appreciative of all the folks that have subscribed and enjoy the show and like what we're doing, uplifting candidates all across the United States so we can hopefully turn these like local houses blue. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about and want to get into the reason why you're running, Natalie, is about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I bought the book Run for Something. Mm-hmm. I think it's the Run for Something's like CEO or COO or whatever her designation is, wrote this book. And in it, she talks about how the GOP has focused their efforts on state houses and state races and local races and have built a power base so that they can continue to gerrymander for congressional districts and congressional races. Mm-hmm. What has been the Idaho Democratic Party's support of your campaign as you've gone through the process? Are you a first-time candidate? And what have you kind of learned about how party politics works in Idaho?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Run for Something was my first endorsement. It was the first book I read and thing I did. I did one of their classes online and then applied for endorsement from them. So nice. love that organization. They have been very helpful, very instrumental in getting this campaign off the ground and running. Democratic politics in Idaho are grassroots, even as a party, much like my campaign is a very grassroots campaign. And our state party, our county party, I live in the largest, most populous county in Idaho, the capital city, Ada County, Boise City. I actually live outside of city limits in unincorporated Ada County, but the party's really, gone through a lot of change over the last several years. We've had a lot of turnover in leadership. And so the party is trying to sort of brand their approach and how they're supporting candidates. And so it's been they're doing a great job. They're working really hard, but I tell them all the time, I wish I was running with the party 5 years from now when they're like actually rooted and have the resources available to help the candidates a little bit more. But they're growing, and so am I at the same time. And so that's also
Nice.
that's also a great place to be in, because we get to sort of help each other and look for outside resources and help, like run for something, and different people that can give us good ideas, and look to other states for help in sort of building our party infrastructure in the state.
Now I'm thinking of, like, when I think of Idaho, I think it reminds me of like, um, gosh, who was the Democrat running in Missouri in like 2018, 2020, and what his campaign ad, he like put a gun together blindfolded. Um, and it was
Yeah.
like just the sense of like Democrats, we don't have to be like, we could talk about things like lifting the minimum wage to frontline workers, but also to business. Are you finding yourself in a position where you don't have to compromise your values? Like, you have the same message whether you're talking to rural voters or those that are in like bigger cities like Boise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I have the same message, because Idaho is so trending so extreme, and the politics have gotten so chaotic. And I talk a lot about distraction politics here, which we've seen on the federal level. And that's happening here locally as well. And so everybody agrees on bringing the narrative back to the real issues, the issues that are affecting actual people, everyday people. And we're seeing, the boogeymen issues take the floor more than the
Mm.
real problems. And so that's where I focus my efforts. And even when it comes to guns, which, yes, Idaho is a very gun friendly is an understatement. Very, very 2A state. But even when I have all kinds of quotes from people at the doors and stuff saying like, I'm a gun lover and I'm voting for you, because I tell them, look, that is not what we need to be talking about right now. We need to be talking about property taxes. People are leaving the state because they can't afford to live here. Wages, taxes, affordable housing, access to healthcare. These really basic things are the things that are driving people out of this state. And instead we want to fight about guns and CRT and whatever. And when I name that as distraction politics for people, they go, oh yeah. And we can all get on the same page of the
I
real.
can't help but feel a little like responsible, because Idaho is one of the places that a lot of former Californians, because they've been priced out of California,
Uh-huh.
I have a whole lot of folks that have moved into Boise, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't help feel a little bit like, it's a California, a former California issue. But I'm wondering if that is um, one of the things that you've heard people talk about, is people from out of state that are like replacing Idahoans.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Idahoans in Idaho, or is that just kind of like just a narrative thing that, oh, it's not really happening? People are leaving on their own because it's unaffordable. What are you finding on the ground?
They're leaving on their own, but to me, that's replacing them.
True.
Because
Yeah.
they're coming and they're driving up the costs so much because of the California salaries that they're bringing with them. They're offering cash on houses. The bidding wars were very, very real. It has slowed down a little bit, but there would be locals who would put in an offer on a home, and there'd be 4 Californians who offered cash, for the house. And so this local Idaho couple has no chance at all. Even if the first buyer falls through or something, it's just not possible. And homes were going within hours of being listed. We have lots of people who buy homes here and don't ever come and live in them. They buy homes and then turn around and rent them. And so It's definitely real, and we talk about that a lot when we're talking about the cost of housing. How some of the solutions that I have for the cost of housing, people don't love because they don't act. It's not about affordable housing. It's about at least making sure the new people coming in are then paying for the impact of them coming in. So building more schools, building out roads, right? Things like that. Having developers pay impact fees, which they're of course going to roll hand over fist to the buyer. But frankly, these buyers can afford it. So let them pay to build out the community rather than locals then having to pay for it through bonds and levies for new schools and new fire districts and things like that. I think that's really the biggest issue that we're seeing is not only are they coming in and pricing us out of houses, but then they're costing locals a lot of money by increasing our property taxes because the home valuations go up, by causing new bonds and levies for schools, fire districts, roads, things that we end up paying for. And when we were here, there were enough, right? So that's the real issue for the locals, I think.
Yeah, I think it's such a difficult issue because at the same time, like as a homeowner myself, I've had the benefit of like the value of my house going up rapidly in California
Mhm.
because of all the scarcity of housing.
Right.
But at the same time, it is like, I mean, that's great for me, but I also want people to be able to afford a home
Right.
and like live that American dream. I don't think it's necessarily the viewpoint of the American dream being called a dream because you got to be asleep to believe it, right? I am the generation where like my mom couldn't afford a house, and now I have not only bought one house, but I bought two.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and like part of it is the empathy that I have for folks, and I don't think that there's people that don't have empathy. I think there are people that don't have empathy, but I just haven't found a way to legislate empathy into folks. Have you found
Oh,
it to be a situation where other Idahoans are open to the things that you're talking about, as far as like healthcare, education, things that they may not directly benefit from, but
mhm.
they have an understanding that you know helping the least among us helps us all.
Yeah. I'm a teacher, so you're speaking my language, and I certainly will be a person who legislates from the heart, and legislates on behalf of people. And that's that, like, empathy is the absolute key. And how do you legislate that? That has been what this campaign's entirely about. I've met people at the door that I have to explain, even though your kids are grown and so you think that public education doesn't affect you anymore, it absolutely does, because those are your servers, your doctors, your right. This is the next economy. This is the next workforce. So you should absolutely care about other people's children still, because they will affect you in your life. And people have to be reminded of that. And same with the housing issue. I've had great success. I was unanimously appointed by our county commissioners, which are a couple of them are in that extremist camp, to sit on the developer impact fee advisory board so that I could be in those conversations as an educator, because property taxes directly correlate, with education, and things like that. But even the developers and people are going, yeah, it makes sense that the new growth should pay for itself and locals shouldn't have to. To your point, in California, it's really like here, our home valuation increasing is not beneficial at all, even as a homeowner, which I am as well, because my property taxes hike up. Our homeowners exemption has not been re-indexed. So we're seeing people are being taxed out of their homes. They have a mortgage they can afford, but now their property taxes are so high, they can't even afford it. Or folks on fixed incomes can't afford just their property taxes anymore. So
Absolutely.
we need to re-index our homeowners exemption, or do an assessed value cap, which a lot of people don't want to talk about because of California. um,
Yeah.
but when you really do bring it to the table as a solution and say, what if your assessed value was capped at this time or this point, or once you're on a fixed income, or once you've lived in it X amount of years, or at the time of purchase, and then it's reassessed when it goes for sale. When you make it make sense to people and not just, oh, this California proposition that you want to bring to Idaho, when you explain what it is and what its purpose is, people are empathetic and can see, oh, that makes sense, especially when you name the groups of people that it's affecting. Small families who need to upgrade because they're having more kids, or retired people who are on a fixed income. When you make it about people rather than policies or boogeymen or money, people can hear
Right.
that, I think.
Right. And I just want to clarify. I do not own two houses at once. I bought our first house like 5 years ago,
Yeah.
and we've done the exact same thing. We had a second child. Okay, so let's see
Oh,
what's going on. My wife finished nursing school, so
yeah.
we were able to, sell that house,
Yeah.
take the proceeds, and then buy, our current home. But I wanted to kind of circle back to the teaching thing, because I think over the last couple of years we've seen teachers, specifically in places like Idaho or Kansas and like West Virginia, Ohio, most recently,
Mhm.
who are getting more political and actually running for office. What is the thing that you think? I know you said you had started with run for something. What was the thing that finally made you say, you know what? I may not have a political background, but I'm going to do this. I'm
Yeah.
going to run.
Yeah. Yeah. Run for something came after that moment for me. So that moment was during COVID as an educator, when our schools were shut down, but then there was great debate about whether or not to open them and what protocols to put into place or not um, during during the following school year. And I had colleagues who were high risk, one who had just had a really high risk pregnancy and their baby was, at risk. Um, and my district and school board were not taking educators into account when they were making decisions. And I was told many times that if I'm not there for the kids, I shouldn't be there at all. And I had to explain to people, your teachers' well-being affects kids. Kids can't learn from teachers who are terrified. I was a caretaker for my 90-year-old grandparents at the time. I was not comfortable going into a COVID petri dish without any protocols in place, mitigating measures, and then going and seeing my 90-year-old grandparents, but that
Mm,
wasn't being heard. And I started being ignored. Then I started being chastised. Then I started being threatened. Um, and that was when I
threat,
decided I was
threatened.
not. Well, statements like, if you're not here for kids, maybe you shouldn't be here at all. Um,
Oh,
about being a teacher, and me saying, I am here for kids and we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and maybe we can think about all of the stakeholders. And I put together programs for our kids while we were shut down. I put together like a bike helmet and reflector pickup drive through, and people are like, oh, so you think we shouldn't be in school, but you think you should be giving away free stuff. I'm like, yes, we should be helping kids in a safe way. That's what I believe in. And drive through, pick up a free helmet and reflectors isn't going to harm anyone, and is a service that we can provide and I can put together with this nonprofit. Why would I not? So just that kind of tension was happening. And then during our legislative session, education was defunded. Our rainy day fund was frozen. I work in a very low income and technically a rural school. So literally it's a rainy day. Like when it rains, our gymnasium floods. We have a lot of schools.
oh,
Idaho has an $800 million check to get all of our schools up to standards physically. And so having the rainy day fund frozen when we were in the middle of a global pandemic, having teachers come under attack, public school becomes public enemy number one. And we're trying to do distance learning, give kids hotspots and computers, and we don't even have the broadband to accommodate that out here where I live. It all just became so clear that what was happening was political and was unacceptable, and no one was going to listen. So I will put myself in the ring. And I told a lot of people that when you get punched walking down the street, it really sucks. But when you get punched in the boxing ring, it's worth it, And so my job was becoming political anyways. And so I decided I need to just go engage in politics, because then it will at least feel like it's for something. I can make change at the end
Yes.
instead of just screaming into the void. So that
Yes, I think
became my dream.
that's such a big deal. And I think people are afraid to run for like a number of reasons, but I think, win or lose, as a person who, I mean, I guess technically I won a primary, but lost to general. It was one of those things where, I still had a platform where I
Yeah.
wasn't just being upset about XYZ that I wanted to see done, but that I could talk about, and actually somebody would write down an art, like put it in an article about what I thought,
Mhm.
which influences the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm one of the things that I have absolutely gotten a kick out of with your campaign is your use of different media. In particular, one thing that I was so against getting a TikTok early on in like 2018. So I thought that
Um,
was for the young kids.
yeah.
But now I've embraced it. And one of the things I think is very cool behind the scenes thing is the way that you use your TikTok to kind of show, hey, I'm a regular person and I'm doing this because I'm looking for a different job. It's not because I, am wanting to turn this into some kind of career where I'm going to get a whole bunch of money later on and sit on a whole bunch of boards and things like that. I'm just a regular person. I'm here to help kids and reform education.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of what kind of made you start using social media to kind of tell that story? Was it just a idea that came in your head? It's like, it's a platform. I'm going to use it. Or did you get like the advice like, hey, you should have a TikTok?
No, so I am a theater artist by trade. So
Nice.
my bachelor's degree is in performance and directing, and I have worked professionally, and I teach theater and art. And then I got my master's degree in education and started teaching it. So it's really intuitive for me. The whole package production value is something I'm very aware of. And so when I decided to run, I did the run for something training. And then I called a local Democratic legislator here and said, like, what do I do? And he walked me through filing and all that. And then I just sort of went, okay, I need a website. And I went and looked at a few people's websites and called a friend and said, I need a headshot. And I designed the logo myself in Canva for free. And had like 4 or 5 different ideas and texted them to friends and got their opinions. And then the one was so obvious that it was the one. And so it all just kind of snowballed. And then it was a matter of the website. I wanted to like increase the SEO. So I wanted to make sure that website was the first thing that people saw when they Googled me. And so social media seemed like a really good way to start getting clicks and getting that SEO up. And so that was honestly kind of the impetus. And I'm a very goal-oriented person. So we set, at first, this campaign was just me and my website guy. And to this day, he's the longest staffer that's been with me from the very impetus of this. And we would set goals like, let's get 500 followers by this day. And so I would comment people and look up people and just sort of built the presence online on Facebook and then Instagram, and then Twitter, and TikTok was last. I was absolutely resisting TikTok because I don't understand it. I think it's for the kids, and the time that it all takes is just a lot. And the bench here is very thin. So having staffers to help do that and people who can do your voice for you and stuff is really hard. So I'm primarily managing the social media, or have for a long time. And now I have some people that are really helping. But for the most part, it was me. And so I resisted TikTok because I was like, I don't have time to make sure I look good all the time and have some good idea of what to say. It just, again, it seemed like a whole production, and I didn't want to do crummy productions. But then I sort of had because that was the hang up, I had the pivot to like, well, what if it wasn't a production and it was just you being you? And so I was willing to sort of, I definitely took inspiration from Lindsay here in Idaho and Jess Piper in Missouri. But they both have a very clear style and way that they do their TikToks. Mine is just sort of whatever I feel like.
Mine too.
Yeah. And it's just, but that's how my campaign was. Even the Facebook and stuff, it was just pictures of me outdoor knocking, or me, stuffing envelopes, and a picture of my table covered in envelopes and letters and stuff, and just showing people, hey, this is me. This is the campaign. This is my family, whatever. And it really took off. People really liked it because I think people are tired of politicians. They want regular people in office. And I certainly had some imposter syndrome early on. Like, I'm not qualified for this. Why should I do this? And then I realized the people who are qualified are the people we don't trust. So maybe we want just more folks like ourselves in there.
Like regular politicians have to like fake to be real people, I think. And you definitely have imposter syndrome. First time I ever kind of experienced it was last September. I was in Washington, D.C., at a function, and Chris Jones, who is running for governor of Arkansas, along with Charles Booker and Malcolm Kenyatta was one of the keynote speakers, and then the Congresswoman Cori Bush. And I felt like, how am I at this event with Cori Bush, Charles Booker, and Chris Jones, who is going to be on the show next week, I believe. But the man, like that man, is just he's a genius.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was fanboying all over the place. But at the same time, I think that it's really important for people to know that what makes someone qualified to represent your community is being a part of that community. Yeah. And I think, after Donald Trump was president, anybody's qualified to do any government now. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your race in particular. Are you running against an incumbent? And what their whole kind of what's the dichotomy between you two?
Yeah. So my race is interesting. I actually got in the game to oppose someone who lost their primary. So my opponent is different now than I had intended. Because of being a redistricting year and everything. So I launched my campaign 16 months ahead of my election. And so I just wanted to get the momentum of building my thing before I put it really to the test with the campaign of the actual cycle. But with that came a lot of being in limbo, because you build a campaign around, the dichotomy between you and your opponent. So my previous opponent was a freshman legislator, was absolutely an extremist, aligned with a special interest group here, the Idaho Freedom Foundation. He was ranked one of their top 5 legislators, just really extreme. And people from both sides of the aisle were not a fan of him as a freshman legislator, just coming in and pulling this agenda. And so I had a lot of support, bipartisan support in wanting to run to oppose him. And then he lost, thank God for Idaho, because I wouldn't want to risk him serving another term in Idaho, but that made my race a lot harder because my new opponent is a 12-year incumbent. He's an older gentleman who is very pro voucher, very anti-public school. He sits on a private Christian school board. His daughter is also in the legislature, so it's a family of politicians.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in this district too. So his daughter is the Senate candidate and he is the rep candidate, which I think is really problematic and not a diversity of representation at all for our voters. But so he has that old school GOP, he's a farmer. So he has that sort of
say no more. I understand.
Yeah. But it's really interesting. I've been having a great experience with people when we talk about him. For a long time at the door, I would say, I won't tell you my opponent's name. If he wants you to know, he can come and talk to you himself. I'm here to let you get to know me. And then we've recently made the pivot to talking about him and the differences between he and myself. And it's been really interesting because people are tired of the old boys club. Everyone agrees there should be term limits. Everyone agrees that once you're in office too long, you get complacent, and that someone who just votes party line, even on the House floor, who just takes marching orders from the caucus, is complicit with extremism, because when those extremist bills come up and you are not an upstander within your own caucus, you're now an extremist because you're passing on their agenda. And so as much as people, have told me, oh, this is going to be a lot harder race because he's an incumbent and he's kind of more moderate and old school and not an extremist, people are not at the doors. People are not seeming to feel that way in my experience so far.
Is he knocking on doors himself, or is he like one of those folks that's like, I have money, so I just run ads and I'll run TV commercials all day till the cows come home?
Yeah, Republicans here don't campaign very hard at all. The larger races will do ads and stuff, but a lot of the ledge candidates don't even do ads. They literally put out some yard signs and call it a day because they think they'll win with that R by their name. But I'll tell you, this cycle is the cycle to be asking folks to vote for a Dem, as long as you're showing up at their door and letting them meet you and know who you are and understand why you're running as a Democratic candidate and why it's important to vote for people and issues over a party. Because this Roe issue has women ready to vote in unprecedented numbers in Idaho, and the youth vote. And even a lot of, regular conservative folks are not comfortable with the extremism that we're seeing here. And so they're saying anyways that they are willing to maybe cross the aisle on a candidate or two. And I tell folks that I'm not asking you to convert, to be a Democrat, but to vote for a Democrat if they're the best candidate for the job, and people seem effective.
One of the questions that just popped up in the chat is from Liberty Twitcher, who wants to know if you are against school vouchers.
Yes, I am. As a public school teacher, diverting public funds from public schools is detrimental to the public school system and is a form of gerrymandering in itself. It's really important, that one of the biggest arguments folks say, and I've had families say to me, only a couple, but why should I have to pay twice for schooling if I want to send my student to a private school? Public schools are required by law to hold a space for your child in the event that you can no longer afford to send them to private school or whatever. Also, we provide a lot of the resources for those private school children. We provide the busing and transportation oftentimes. We provide we provide the athletics and the extracurriculars. So again, like a student who attends a private school can enroll to participate in football at the public school. So we have to account for that. So if you pull your tax dollars because you're attending a private school, then your public school is still having to function on this level and holding space for every student but without the money for every student. And also
Right.
we provide all kinds of services that private schools don't have to provide. And again, even if it's not for your child, we're providing academics, healthcare, mental health care, breakfast and lunch. We have like clothing closets for a lot of our kids. A lot of our schools have closets for clothing and school supplies. We provide transportation. So public schools fill nearly every societal void. And to ask us to do that without the dollars for every student is unreasonable. And in Idaho, it's unconstitutional because our state constitution requires a fully funded common school, and private schools are not a part of that. So for the government to allow state funding to go to private schools would be unconstitutional.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about school vouchers myself,
Mhm.
because I'm of the same thought, and to me, school vouchers, and I understand about, you know, wanting your kid to go to a different school because of the way our current public school system is funded and what's happening in our current public school. I mean, you always have the choice, right, to put them in private school. Like if it was just a Republican, it would be like, well, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. Sorry.
Right.
Um, and I think in places like Chicago and DC, where public schools are so impacted, that they are not having the outcomes that we would like to see.
Mhm.
Um, Parents are desperate, and I understand that. But at the same time, I think that, to me, I observe everything through my own experience and lens, right? So as a black man living in the United States, I see public schools, and the demonization of public schools now
Mhm.
started when when they started to become segregated, or
Mhm.
desegregated rather, where
Right.
it became a situation of like, if we got to fund the school that my kid goes to and there's black and brown students that are going there too, well, I want to pull my kid out and put him somewhere else, and I'll put money to that. But that in turn has hurt all students. It hurts all, like, so basically a roundabout way of saying this racism it hurts us all in the
Mhm.
long run.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. It's a form of segregation. Vouchers is a form of classist segregation, racist segregation, because it creates the haves and have-nots. Having private schools does that in general. I understand that if you're a family who can't afford the private school, then you feel left out of that opportunity. But again, here in Idaho, constitutionally, the idea is that we would create a public school that everyone is comfortable with and wants to send their students to. And the only reason that you would not want to send your student to that public school is if you wanted some sort of religious aspect to your education or some other sort of specialized education, but not because of the quality of the school. No one should have to send their student to private school because of the quality of the building or the education or the curriculum being taught. And so that is why I'm against vouchers, because we need to be investing and improving our schools rather than pulling funding and just, making it the Wild West where, people just go where they can based on their income, especially when you're a state who has $2 billion surpluses and you call yourself fiscally conservative. Part of being fiscally conservative is making good investments, not shoving money under a mattress and
wow,
calling
yeah.
that good money management. We should be investing in our schools, make them better, and make them what our families want them to be, and make them equitable and safe and fair. So there isn't a need to send your student to private schooling again, unless it's because of some personal belief that you want instilled in the education. Um,
Right.
yeah, but
Right.
CRT, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Yeah, no, go. Can we dive into it? Because I was just gonna say, and I don't want to speak for all progressives, myself included in this. But when it comes to education, at least, I think we can start from a standpoint of we want public schools for our families and communities that provide each and every student with the opportunity to achieve their fullest potential. That is where every progressive starts in this country, and it speaks a lot to the values of things that we value is equal opportunity.
Mhm.
And I think that gets construed by conservatives when we say equal opportunity to equal outcomes, which is
Mhm.
different, right? We
Right.
want equal opportunity. We want fairness. We want a level playing field, and we want each and every child to have those opportunities. And so I think when we provide adequate funding for public schools, when we deliver instruction in a way that recognizes the differences, not only in terms of the interests, but of the needs of specific children, because not all kids learn the same.
Mhm.
That was one of the things I did not know myself until I was already in college. But also providing opportunities to learn outside of classroom time
Mhm.
is so important, and that's why I think not only am I a person who's advocating for public schools, but I want to see an investment in pre-K education, um, where every student 3 and older is starting to get instruction and learn.
Yeah.
Um, is that I don't know if that I don't want to speak for you, but
Oh,
I'm trying.
100%. That is one of my babies, and that is something that my opponent voted against funding for pre-K. In Idaho, we've had people say that we've had representatives on the House floor make statements about women shouldn't be having other people raise their children. So it then becomes an issue of if you send your kid to pre-K, you're an empowered woman, God forbid. Um, and so it's really, that is something that has gotten really divisive. And as you were saying earlier about the attacks on public education being sort of like racially driven, 100%, because, yeah, they were being desegregated more and more. Where I teach is a great example. It's an older kind of rural school. We outgrew, we were over capacity for years. So finally built a new school, and immediately you had the haves and have nots again. And immediately both schools were at capacity within 1 year. But in this state, they want to use these boogeymen of critical race theory and, social emotional
Um,
learning, all these reasons to not fund education. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna get into this comment that a certain person running in Pennsylvania said about learning how to use stripper poles and whatnot in school and
Right.
CRT, and that's going to be one of the things that they get rid of. Our kids
Uh,
are not going to learn about how to use stripper poles
uh,
in school, and,
right.
and it just kind of just has turned into nonsense. How do you keep the focus on saying, like, when it comes to education reform, I'm in the classroom. Let me
Yep.
tell you about what's happening. And these, like you said, boogeymen of CRT and whatever else they want to
LGBTQ,
come up.
SEL. Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, something horrible that happened in Idaho has actually ended up being a gift to all of us running. Our lieutenant governor, who is an extremist and was in the news, national news, a couple of times for um, doing executive orders when our governor was out of the state. That,
Oh, that was Idaho?
yeah, yeah.
Oh man.
Um, and she, similarly to a comment you made earlier, she had one of her campaign, things was her with a Bible with a gun on it, and so she assembled an a CRT task force, which is horrible because it was a direct attack, and she was allowed to assemble this task force to basically witch hunt educators for an entire year. And it was ridiculous, but it happened. And the great news is I get to tell everyone who wants to bring up critical race theory to me, well, there was a task force and your extreme right lieutenant governor did all of this investigating and came up with nothing. And you bet your butt if she had found anything, we would have all heard about it and she would have shut the state down. So that should be evidence for you that this is not happening. Because if she could have proven something, she absolutely would have. That would have been her golden ticket to defund public schools and privatize education in Idaho, which is absolutely what one of our special interest groups wants to see happen here. And they've said that again on the state, well, in their party platform, it says that they want to defund public school and privatize schooling here in Idaho. So yeah. I don't have a hard time at all telling people that it's not happening. And if you don't want to believe me as a teacher and a Democrat, which you don't value, believe your extreme far right lieutenant governor, who also came up with no evidence that this is occurring in our schools. And I do tell people also that one of their values is local control. So if you're hearing of this happening, have you called the principal? Have you gone to the building, to the school board, to the superintendent? Are you taking measures at a local level to address the individual incident? Or are you wanting far overreaching government control to come and address this issue? Because I didn't think you believed in that.
It is right. It's and then you see the light bulb go off like, wait. That's not what hold on a second. Yeah. It's the same thing with to me, the reproductive rights is, the people that are always clamoring about small government and say the government's staying out of my business, but unless it's this issue, we want the government in there. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you could, because I imagine, like the district that I ran for, the congressional district I ran for, and a lot of Democrats running in what would be more conservative areas. Mm-hmm. Part of our coalition that I think we've lost ground to Republicans, and I understand why, because conservative thoughts to me are just easier to understand, right? Like if I just told you, if you work hard, you get ahead, that's easy to understand, as opposed to on the left where we say, well, that's not necessarily true. A lot of it is like who and then, depending on if you're a man or a woman or LGBTQ and blah, 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 blah. That's all people hear. It's difficult to understand those things. But one of the things I think we have to kind of get back to is white working class people. What has kind of been your message when you're talking to that demographic? How are you getting them to say, yeah, you know what, she might be a Democrat, but what she's talking about is, I can understand that. I can get on board with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, people understand things most when they're personally affected by it. And so while I wish that people could be empathetic to stories that are not their own, that's certainly a bigger ask. I'm successful. Like I said, timing is everything right now in Idaho. White middle-class people are not doing well. People who are relatively privileged are losing their homes and having to leave the state and struggling to find jobs where they have good benefits and healthcare, So I can bring them into the conversation because a lot of folks are not struggling, at a deep and dire level, but they're less comfortable than they would like. And being able to say, don't you think that it's unfortunate when your property taxes go up so much that you have to reevaluate your budget and your spending? You're not just comfortably, your income and your expenses aren't comfortably balanced anymore, and you have to figure out how to make it work. They're like, yeah, it really sucks. I'm like, and don't you think that people who experience that all the time or at a more extensive level than you might, need help? Right. I'm mostly talking to people about where they're at. I will tell you, there's not a lot of extreme liberal, which again, we don't think that it is extreme, but I can acknowledge that people here think that taking care of other people is extreme. And so I will say I'm talking a lot about taking care of themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of people here in Idaho are not prospering. And again, I can get them to think about others and bring that empathy lens when I'm talking about education, when I'm talking about housing, and I talk about young families or elderly folks or kids and students who will grow up to be the next workforce here and who will be your doctors when you're in your golden years and you're, you know, you should care that they are well educated. But I will say, I mean, ultimately to your, I have made it very simple. My campaign slogan is for all of us. And so I'm absolutely advocating for the big tent and for empathy. And I have no problem talking to people about that, because when I point out, you know, their neighbors or their kids or their aging parents, when I can relate the for all of us back to them. I think for so long politics was so us and them divisive, but now people are starting to realize, maybe COVID played a role in this, but people are realizing that we all have somebody in our life that is affected in this way. We all have a relative or a friend or a family member who's struggling, and for you to not include them in your decision making isn't working anymore. And so I use simple platform points like affordable housing for all of us, livable wages for all of us. My full slogan is a more safe, fair, and affordable Idaho for all of us. And both sides of the aisle value safety. We have different ideas of what that looks like. Both sides of the aisle value affordability. We have different ideas of what that might look like, but we have the same value.
Right.
And both sides of the aisle value fairness. We have different ideas of what it looks like, but it's the same core value. And so if I can remind people that we value the same thing, we just need to figure out how to get there together. People can engage a little more, I think.
Well said. I will kind of shift now to what we usually do is have like a panel discussion about like what's happening in the news. So in the last kind of few minutes that we have here, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a couple of things that are going on nationally. With the first one being this week, we had Hurricane Ian that just went through Florida and South Carolina, parts of Georgia, and that whole southeast of the United States. My sister lives in Orlando, and I called her on Tuesday, either Tuesday or Wednesday, and asked her how her hurricane. And she said, "Well, I bought 3 bottles of wine, so we're doing all right." But as a Californian in Florida, she's not. That's her idea of preparation.
Yeah.
But you know, we've also seen kind of like now in the aftermath, we've seen that despite voting against hurricane relief funding, GOP senators Marco Rubio and Rick Scott, who didn't vote for the spending bill that includes relief to help Florida, are now asking, "Oh, we have to do all this stuff for people." I wonder if you kind of have any thoughts on that. Do you think that? I think it's very typical of the GOP to say like, "No, we're not going to vote for this. We are very much individualistic until our people are hurt."
Yep. 100%. I agree with you. I think it's just ridiculous. And that's why I think we just need to change the kind of person that we're putting into these roles, because it just doesn't make any sense, especially these things. And it seems like when they get on the floor and come to a vote, they quit being humans, because even as the conservative humans they are, like, you go to church and you talk about loving your neighbor and taking care of the least of us, and you talk about catastrophes and floods, the flood and the ark and saving people, but then you vote in direct opposition of everything you say you believe in. you know, and it makes no sense to me. And then I think that is what sets in later after the fact. They realize, they start seeing the footage of real human beings in the middle of a real catastrophe, and their little human heart reminds them, oh my gosh, I actually do care a little bit. I do want to help somebody. I do believe in helping people. But when they're on the floor, it's not about people. It's about policy. It's about handouts or something. And I don't understand how that changes.
Man, you hit the nail on the head. I've been blessed after the election to go around with Michael Tubbs, who's the former mayor of Stockton, and he is now the executive director of a group called EPIC, or Ending Poverty in California. And we've done these listening sessions throughout the state. And one of the things that I thought was mind blowing was the fact that a lady talked to us about how she lost her kids. They had been taken away from her, not because she was on drugs, not because she was doing this or that, but because she was poor. They took her kids away from her, put them in foster care, and gave them to someone else, and are then paying someone else to take care of her kids because we refuse to pay her to take care of her own kids.
Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
like mind blown. Like, wow,
That,
some of the stuff we do is really backwards.
yeah. And that's such a beautiful, again, like simple way of illustrating that, because we might talk about, well, instead of, you know, flooding the system with kids, we need to provide more resources like access to childcare, access, and we could rattle off all this jargon. But when you say you're paying someone else to take care of my kids instead of paying me, helping me take care of my kids by, you know, providing for me, that's just so like obvious. It
Right.
becomes so clear and so obvious. And yet there will be folks who just can't get behind it and will say, of course, why would we? Why would we pay you to take care of your own children? It's like, why would you pay someone else?
Right. The other thing, there's two more stories that I want to kind of get your impression on. The other one being, we had HR 7780, I believe is the designation of it, which is school-based mental health services funding, and it was on the floor of the House. 205 Republicans voted against school-based mental health services for children, who, in direct contrast to what they've said after every school shooting, that's mental health, mental health, mental health.
Mhm.
But we're not going to put our money where our mouth is and just simply vote to say, okay, yeah, let's get these kids some mental health services that they need on campus. I'm
Mhm.
wondering, in a place like Idaho, do you hear that often when people talk about gun control and the response to it as it being a mental health issue? Um, or is it just like, no, guns don't kill people, people kill people?
Both. Every excuse that there could be will be used. Yeah. Guns don't kill people. People do. It's a mental health issue. Yeah, I think the thing we hear the most is the whole it's a bad guy. It's a bad guy with a gun, and we need good guys with guns to protect you from them. You know, and that's the answer. So arming teachers, very, very highly desired here. More people with more guns would solve the problem. Mental health is really interesting. Our suicide rate is relatively high, and especially among youth here in Idaho. And so we have a lot of posturing about caring about mental health. But to your point, there's also then, whenever the rubber meets the road, there's a lot of fear, for example, with mental health care, of what sort of leftist liberal agenda would come with it. So what is that mental health care? Is it going to be a bunch of counselors sitting down and teaching kids to be gay and trans? No, it's going to be having more counselors so that children can actually see someone instead of sitting in the office for 75 minutes before someone can even speak to them when they're in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah.
But the boogeymen, the fake imaginary boogeymen, the distraction politics take over, and then we lose meaningful policy to these fake hypothetical potential threats, potential future threats. And unfortunately, your state and Washington to the north are not Washington. It's not north. It is north of me.
North.
It is north of me, but part of the state it is not north of. So, but yeah, people love to point to Washington and California as the examples of like, it's happening. There are actual schools where they're doing these crazy things, and what the social emotional learning has to do with. And it's just so unfortunate that even those, it's case by case. It's not the entire state, every single school in the entire state, you know.
Right. And, per capita, there's way less in California than there are
Right.
other places.
Right. But it's just it's this fear of potential fake threats that stops us from addressing the real immediate threat, which is our suicide rates, shootings, mental health issues. And we would rather not address those in the name of what could happen than address them and watch how the fear doesn't actually happen.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, unfortunate.
Yeah, really.
The thing I want to get your take on is we just saw in Italy, Georgia Maloney, I think it's her name, who was a far right candidate, win an election and is now going to be the prime minister. And folks are saying she's the most far right candidate since Mussolini in Italy. And she does say some off the wall things, some bonkers things, in my opinion, about very anti LGBTQ. We're going to take our country back from this and that. And it's just mirrored rhetoric that we've seen from the Steve Bannon Trump wing of the Republican. I won't say wing because it's a large segment of the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's a kind of a signal of where things are headed around the world, and democracies, not only in Italy, but we're seeing in Brazil's having an election today, and Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro, who's tried to mirror himself in Trump's image, make himself in Trump's image, of saying like the results are fake. If I don't win, that it's rigged.
Right.
Kind of, what is your take on that? Do you speak to democracy as a whole? Do you think we can kind of pull back from this like brinkmanship I think we're seeing in democracies around the world?
Mm-hmm.
It's a big question for you. I'm sorry.
It's really big. Yeah, it's really big. But I am really comfortable in that space of entertaining that because we have to. And I believe in systems and cycles and the pendulum. And I believe that we're here because we have seen progress in the past. And this is a response to that. I think even now we've seen, these movements. The women's movement has been incredible since Trump's election, and mobilized in a way that it hadn't for quite some time. And so I think that it's sort of every action has a reaction. I think this is a reaction to the progress that we have made. I know that it's hard to lose. It's easy to lose sight of that. I know that in the conversation on race and equality, it's really hard right now to think that we have made any progress. But I think that in a way we have. I think that the conversations that are being had, the awareness that is there, is meaningful, and that is why there's a direct response of shutting it down. And you see the puffing up because they feel threatened. And they wouldn't feel threatened if we weren't actually making some progress in forward thinking and inclusion and acceptance and, even economically using money, this money centric, capitalism that we live in here. I think that there has been a little bit of an awareness brought to that, and a lot of people are starting to use their money to make a point and patronize places that they believe in and not patronize places they don't believe in and things like that. And that is a kind of political engagement that I don't think was happening in the 90s very much, in early 2000s. And so we've seen sort of a snap of democracy in action, I think, and democracy working well, and people having a voice, and people recognizing their power through their pocketbook and through social media and all these influencers now on both sides. But democracy, I think, has been at work, and that's why it's being shut down in every way, because we have been at work. And so I have faith that those of us who believe in democracy will stand strong and will continue to grow our numbers. This campaign is evidence of that. A lot of people believe that my district is deep red, and it isn't. I've been knocking doors for 16 months. I've spoken to over 6,500 voters directly, and even those with an R next to their name on the registration, half of them are Dems who've converted R to vote in the primary. A bunch of them are really moderate Rs. And they're all people who are just tired of politics in general and want to get back to when you didn't even really pay attention to politics because it was about taxes and boring stuff, They're tired of politics being in their face every day. And so I really have faith that progress will out. But I think it's indicative of progress that there will be a resistance, and the resistance will be loud. And I don't know. I hope I'm right.
What is it? I'm reminded a little bit, and this is kind of like the frustration I have with the Democratic infighting, whether people are progressive or conservative Dems. I understand that I understand it. I get it. But, I think we should have a shared value system. Right. We should value certain things. Like I could say healthcare is a human right, and we can differ in the way that we think healthcare can be delivered.
Yeah.
But the other side is not even in the same stratosphere.
Right.
On that value. So I get it, and it's one of the great frustrations that I have. But at this point in time, I'm so happy to uplift your campaign. And the last question kind of I have for you is folks that are in the chat and or they stumble across this. What are things that you need to help you in your campaign? Is it a situation where, money's always good. Money is always good. But is there some kind of thing you're looking for in particular? People with certain skills that are able to help you remotely. I know I started working with Dems for Action, who started making videos and content on my behalf because getting content out is so big, and they were super cool and helping me out with that. So thank you for Dems for Action. But is there what can we do to help you and uplift your campaign?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity. This is huge. Just new audiences always helps. And uplifting the campaign, virtually from afar. So just following, and when you follow the pages, actually liking and commenting and feeding that algorithm, really does make a difference for visibility. And that's how you win an election, is people knowing your name and knowing who you are. So that's so helpful. Yeah, content would be incredible. It's so hard as a candidate to do everything, and I'm teaching full time and campaigning. I go door knocking after school every day, and then events, weekends and evenings, and it's just constant. And so anyone who is able or interested in creating content on our behalf, that'd be amazing. Uplifting the content that's already there, retweeting, reposting, liking, sharing, all of that. And then of course, contributions are incredible for helping us in that effort. We're doing digital ads for online ads. We're not going to do television ads here for a Ledge campaign, but we'll do online ads and mail. We're doing a lot of mail pieces because I launched my campaign so early. There are a lot of folks I spoke to 16 months ago that I need to remind. You saw me, you met me, and that costs a lot of money. So money helps with us being able to do more mail pieces and things like that. And then GOTV, which folks who are great at texting or phone banking, you can do that from anywhere. And we can send you a list, and you can text Idaho voters and remind them to get out and vote on the day of and vote for Natalie. You can do phone banking for us. So on my website, which I can put in the chat, it's Natalie for Idaho, and I own both FOR and the number 4, but natalieforIdaho.com. There's a volunteer sign up. So if you're interested in volunteering, whether that's to create content or to do phone banking or text banking from afar, that would be incredible. We want to have a really, really in-depth get out the vote effort because that is the only way I'll win this district, is for sure if everyone who says they will vote for me actually does. There's no margin of error here. So I have to turn out my Dems. I have to turn out my persuasion universe that I've worked so hard on and make sure that nobody misses their opportunity to vote. So that would be incredible.
Yeah, there you go, Natalie. I think we put it up in the chat. So Natalie for Idaho.com. I want to give a shout out to Kermit and Zelda for following us. Hey guys, one of the things I think that is I just want to uplift candidates and folks across the country running. And so for Kermit to give a shout out to our show about being one of the best, all I'm doing is I'm just a guy here. I'm drinking on the weekend and letting you guys candidates have your platform. So thank you for following and watching. Natalie, now you've been running for 16 months. This is our thing that we do with all candidates. You have your to everybody on why you should be the Idaho's 22nd legislative district. Go ahead and give it to us.
Because I'm an everyday, lifelong Idahoan who understands the real issues that are affecting people. And I believe in taking care of each other and making Idaho more safe, fair, and affordable for all of us.
Boom. Perfect. And
Boom.
reminder for folks to go to natalieforIdaho.com.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity, Lourin. It was so fun.
Not a problem. Anytime you want to come on, you just let me know, and we'll have you on again. If you, I think we're trying to have like a big kind of election night kind of gathering round robin where candidates have popped in and they give us kind of updates on their races and stuff like that. So if you'll join us for that, that would be awesome.
Cool. That would be great.
And so because this week we are starting something new where I my grandmother was a big fan of Jerry Springer. Like in retirement, that was her thing. She'd always watch Maury, Jerry Springer, and Steve Wilkos. and who's the Judge Mathis.
Uh-huh.
That's her lineup. So I'm gonna start doing a Jerry Springer thing with Lauren's final thoughts.
Yeah.
So this week, my final thought this week has to do with what we were talking about with opportunity. It was the
Mhm.
discussion that we kind of talked about a whole bunch of things, but really what the essence of what we talked about boiled down to opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to my philosophy and a lot of progressives philosophy that government should act as a referee between private and unequal interests, and that progressive policy should be based on opportunity. And by opportunity, we mean a level playing field in social and economic affairs, fair dealings between the powerful and the less powerful, the elimination of discrimination, and a quality education for all. Competing interests usually hold unequal power, so it's progressive policies that add weight, that guarantee our specific protections to the weaker interests. For example, unskilled low wage workers have no leverage to bargain for higher pay. That is why it's up to the government to impose reasonable minimum wages. Quite simply, when social and market forces do not naturally promote equal opportunity, it is the government's responsibility to step in. When we talk about opportunity as progressives, we mean more than anything a fair marketplace. And although progressives tend to stress the rights of consumers and employees against businesses, opportunity also means fairness between businesses, especially helping small enterprises against larger ones, and fairness for stockholders against corporate officers. Individual ambition, innovation, and effort, harnessed by the market system, are supposed to be benefits to society as a whole. But happen, it can only happen in a situation where the competition is fair. When progressives talk about opportunity, we also mean fair economic transactions with the government. Government should use the scale of justice when determining taxes. Obviously, a sliding scale where those that have to pay the least are those that have the least ability to pay. And when it's the government that is making payments like contracts and subsidies, public education, and the like, the principle of opportunity dictates that all individuals and companies should have equal access. The concept of opportunity is an easy one for us to sell as progressives. And yet, since Reagan, we've been losing the struggle to right wingers who flatly oppose opportunity. Conservatives have fought against ending discrimination, even though equal treatment is a precondition for equal opportunity. They don't even pretend to support equal opportunity in commerce. Instead, conservatives lobby for government favors, no big contracts, and economic development giveaways. And right wingers seek to destroy anything that allows individuals to stand up to larger economic forces, like labor unions, consumer protections, anti monopoly policies that are constantly under attack. Our mission as progressives is clear. It is to guarantee that all Americans are able to realize their goals through education, hard work, and fair pay. And we must provide every person, not just that privileged few, with an equal opportunity to pursue a better life with equal access to that American dream. And with that, that's going to conclude tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will just reiterate one more time. Please go to natalieforidaho.com. It's so important that we uplift candidates like Natalie who are doing the hard work for us. I can tell you, when you're campaigning, you get no days off. And so she's out there working, and hopefully we get some good news in November, Natalie.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.